She was barely 21. A rising star. A face America had begun to love every Friday night. She had just auditioned for The Godfather Part III, a role that could have changed everything. Her future was blooming, her smile lighting up casting rooms from Los Angeles to New York. And then, she opened her front door. What stood outside wasn't opportunity. It was obsession. A man she never knew, but who had built a fantasy so vivid in his mind, he believed he owned her. In the span of one heartbeat, that fantasy turned into horror. One knock. One shot. And Hollywood lost not just a promising actress, but a sense of innocence it never got back. What does it mean to be adored by millions but not safe in your own home? Where is the line between fame and fatal exposure? She didn't die in a car crash, on a set, or by overdose. She died because she was seen, too much, by the wrong eyes. This is the untold story of Rebecca Schaeffer. When Rebecca Schaeffer first appeared on American television screens, it felt like a breath of fresh air. She didn't arrive like a thunderstorm, demanding attention with scandal or seduction. She floated in, soft, sincere, with an innocence so rare in an industry built on illusion. She wasn't just another pretty face trying to survive the glare of Hollywood. She was the girl next door you actually wanted to know. Born in Eugene, Oregon, in 1967, Rebecca didn't come from industry royalty. Her father was a child psychologist. Her mother, a writer and educator. Her roots were intellectual, middle-class, ordinary, something deeply grounding about her even as she stepped onto the world's biggest stages. By age 16, she had already started modeling. Her porcelain skin, soulful brown eyes, and classic beauty quickly earned her assignments in New York and Japan. But it wasn't just her looks that caught people's attention, it was the way the camera loved her, and how she looked right back with a quiet confidence that hinted at depth beyond her years. In 1986, everything changed. Rebecca was cast in the CBS sitcom My Sister Sam, playing Patty Russell, a spirited teenager who moves in with her older sister in San Francisco. The premise was simple. The chemistry between Rebecca and co-star Pam Dauber was electric. And America responded. Viewers tuned in not just for the humor, but for her. She brought warmth to the screen, genuine, unaffected, and subtly luminous. Critics began whispering the phrase that makes or breaks young careers, breakout star. Magazines took notice. Interviews followed. Fashion spreads came next. Rebecca's appeal was unique, she radiated a kind of purity, unfiltered through Hollywood's usual smoke and mirrors. In an industry obsessed with reinvention, she felt like something real. Something unmanufactured. But even amid the rising tide of fame, she kept her feet on the ground. She once told a reporter, "I just want to be an actress. Not a celebrity." That distinction, so easily ignored in the pursuit of stardom, would later define the tragedy of her story. She studied acting seriously, enrolling at UCLA for theater. She read voraciously, wrote in journals, and kept a tight circle of friends. She refused to buy into the myth that youth and fame were enough. She wanted longevity. She wanted roles that mattered. And just as the industry began to look beyond the sitcom and see her as a potential leading lady, she was auditioning for dramatic films, aiming for bigger, deeper scripts. She was shortlisted for roles in several major productions, and her name had been floated for the role of Mary Corleone in The Godfather Part III, the daughter of Michael Corleone. The kind of role that transforms a rising actress into a legend. But perhaps what made Rebecca so captivating wasn't just her beauty or her potential. It was the gentleness in her spirit. The refusal to bend into Hollywood's harder molds. The sense that she was somehow untouched, still believing in art over fame, craft over chaos. To the public, she was a symbol of what Hollywood could be, a place where talent and sincerity still mattered. She had a future. She had grace. She had time. But as we would all come to learn, she didn't. There were no screaming scandals in Rebecca Schaeffer's childhood. No broken homes, no tabloid-worthy traumas. That's what made her story even more haunting, because her past wasn't loud. It was quiet. But in that quiet, there were shadows. Rebecca was the only child of Benson and Dana Schaeffer, intellectuals, grounded, thoughtful. Their home in Portland, Oregon, was filled with books and music. Not industry agents or red carpets. Her father, a psychiatrist, believed in emotional self-awareness. Her mother, a writer and teacher, nurtured creativity. They raised her to be introspective, curious, and kind. There was love in that home, but also a deep sense of discipline, of responsibility, of high expectations. As a young girl, Rebecca often felt the pull between being herself and being what others needed her to be. She was bright, observant, and sensitive, traits that made her mature faster than her peers. By age 10, she was already dreaming of the stage. But it wasn't just fantasy. It was a calling. Her journals from that time, private, intimate pages never meant for public eyes, revealed a young girl grappling with a strange contradiction, the desire to be seen, and the fear of being misunderstood. At 14, she began exploring modeling, not because she longed to be famous, but because it felt like a doorway. She wanted to act. But the path, especially for someone from outside Hollywood's orbit, often began with a photograph. In high school, she was already different. Not because of arrogance or ambition, but because she saw the world through layers. She wrote poetry. She questioned authority. She challenged herself to understand people's pain. In one of her letters to a childhood friend, she once wrote, "I wonder if actors become actors because they can't speak their truth out loud unless it's someone else's story." There were setbacks early on. Rejections from agencies. Criticism about her height, at just under 5 feet 7 inches, some modeling scouts deemed her too short for runway. She was told to smile more, to lose weight, to change her hair. But she refused to become anyone else's version of beauty. Her body wasn't a product. Her soul wasn't for sale. Her first big break came not in a glamorous casting room, but after months of traveling between Portland and New York, enduring loneliness, auditions in cold buildings, and nights spent wondering if she had made a mistake. At 16, she was signed by elite model management and began landing work in Japan. It paid the bills, but she hated it. The pressure. The objectification. The silence behind the lenses. One day, after a particularly demeaning shoot, she called her mother in tears. "They don't want me," she said. "They want a mannequin." Her mother gently replied, "Then be the kind of actress who makes people see what's real." She never forgot that. When she transitioned to acting, she brought those early wounds with her, not as baggage, but as fuel. She had learned how cruel the industry could be. How easily you could disappear if you didn't fit a template. But she had also learned something deeper, the value of authenticity. She didn't need to play a caricature. She was enough. Still, the pressure never disappeared. Auditions were brutal. Competition was endless. Behind the sweet smile seen on magazine covers was a young woman battling imposter syndrome, questioning whether her success was luck or real. She wanted to be taken seriously. She wanted to prove she wasn't just cute. She wanted roles with meaning. But the industry didn't always care about meaning. It cared about perception. And in a city built on image, Rebecca remained a quiet contradiction, someone who walked into the spotlight carrying the weight of her own private silence. She was sensitive. Too sensitive, some said. She cried after scenes. She over-prepared for auditions. She wrote long letters to herself after bad takes. But that sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was her gift. It was what allowed her to reach audiences not through spectacle, but through subtlety. That kind of vulnerability, though beautiful, is also magnetic, to the right eyes, and the wrong ones. Hollywood doesn't ask who you are. It asks what they can make you become. Rebecca Schaeffer entered the entertainment industry with the fragile hope that being real would be enough. But Hollywood had other plans. It always does. After the success of My Sister Sam, Rebecca's star was on the rise. But success in television, especially for young women, comes with unspoken demands, to be more photogenic, more commercial, more malleable. The quirky charm that had endeared her to viewers was slowly being recast into a marketable brand. Producers began referring to her as the next Molly Ringwald, as if she were a puzzle piece meant to fit a shape that already existed. She smiled in photo shoots. She answered questions in interviews with scripted warmth. But privately, she was uneasy. In her journals, she often referred to herself in the third person. She is sweet. She is safe. She is what they want. She was already beginning to feel like a character in her own life. She knew that if she wanted to grow as an actress, she had to escape the sitcom bubble. She auditioned for darker roles. Gritty roles. Roles that would allow her to shed the skin of Patty Russell and prove that she could be more than just the sweet girl with a smile. But Hollywood didn't make that easy. Time after time, she was told she wasn't edgy enough, sexy enough, dangerous enough. She didn't have the bite of a femme fatale. She didn't have the tragic background of a method actor. What she had was too gentle, too clean, too safe, which, paradoxically, made her disposable. So she made choices. She cut her hair shorter, softening the teen idol image. She took fewer modeling gigs, refusing to pose in swimsuits or lingerie despite pressure from magazines. She hired an acting coach known for pushing boundaries and began training in roles that terrified her emotionally. Her friends noticed the shift, not in her personality, but in her resolve. She wanted to work in film. She wanted serious directors. She wanted respect. One of those serious directors was Francis Ford Coppola. In 1989, she auditioned for The Godfather Part III. The role of Mary Corleone was not just pivotal, it was iconic. It would place her in a cinematic dynasty. She was excited, anxious, hopeful. She believed, for the first time, that her transformation had been worth it. But in Hollywood, reinvention often comes at a price. To maintain relevance, she had to remain visible. Publicity meant exposure. Exposure meant appearances, press tours, and most importantly, accessibility. She began receiving more and more fan mail. Some letters were kind. Others were strange. Some praised her looks. Others dissected them, suggested changes, issued demands. She laughed them off at first. But then came one letter that made her pause. It was from a man named Robert John Bardo. She didn't know it then, but that letter would become the thread that unraveled everything. Still, she didn't stop. She couldn't. In Hollywood, if you slow down, you disappear. She kept pushing. Kept showing up. Kept transforming herself into the actress they wanted her to be, while trying not to lose the woman she really was. But the truth was, she was already being watched, not just by casting directors or fans, but by a man whose obsession had turned into delusion. Her transformation had worked. She had become a star. But stars shine in the dark. And sometimes, that glow attracts more than admiration. It attracts danger. July 18, 1989. A Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. The sky was clear. The birds were loud. Rebecca Schaeffer was expecting a script delivery. She opened her front door. That was the moment her rising star burned out. Not in a blaze of scandal. Not in the fog of addiction. But in a flash of violence that left Hollywood shattered and the world stunned. Rebecca was 21. She had just auditioned for the biggest role of her career. The buzz around The Godfather Part III was growing, and her name was on the shortlist. Casting agents whispered about her natural gravity, her quiet intensity. Directors said she had that indescribable presence that couldn't be taught, only captured. The kind of presence that turns newcomers into legends. She was, by every measure, on the edge of everything. And she was happy. Friends recall her laughing more in those months, dreaming bigger. Believing finally that she belonged, not just as a guest in Hollywood's house, but as one of its rightful residents. She spoke of wanting to study abroad, to work in theater, to write. She wasn't chasing stardom. She was chasing substance. But even as her professional life soared, something darker was building in the shadows. That darkness had a name, Robert John Bardo. He was 19. Isolated. Obsessed. Diagnosed with mental illness. For 3 years, he had followed Rebecca's career obsessively, collecting clippings, watching My Sister Sam reruns, writing letters. In his mind, she wasn't just an actress, she was his. A vision. A salvation. A fantasy he thought he deserved. When Rebecca responded politely to one of his letters with a signed photo, standard for fan mail, he interpreted it as affection. Permission. An open door. Then he watched her in the film scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills. A scene in which she appeared in bed with a male actor shattered his fantasy. He felt betrayed. Furious. In his delusion, he believed she had become impure. And so he acted. Using a private investigator. He obtained Rebecca's home address from DMV records, a legal but horrifyingly easy process at the time. On July 18, he traveled to her apartment on North Sweetser Avenue. When she opened the door, still in her pajamas, expecting a delivery, he pulled a .357 Magnum revolver from a brown paper bag and shot her in the chest at point-blank range. She collapsed in the hallway. Neighbors rushed out. Emergency services were called. She was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead 30 minutes later. Rebecca Schaeffer. Age 21. Shot in her own home. By a stranger who thought he owned her. The shock was immediate and deafening. Hollywood shut down. Actors canceled interviews. Pam Dauber, her co-star, broke down on national television. The entertainment industry, so used to losing its stars to overdoses, accidents, or burnout, now faced a terrifying new reality: fame had become a liability. Visibility had become a threat. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a reckoning. Laws were changed because of her death. California passed the nation's first anti-stalking law. DMV record access was restricted. Celebrity security protocols were rewritten. Rebecca's murder became the case that forced a city, and an industry, to look itself in the mirror and ask, what happens when admiration becomes entitlement? The cameras had once loved her. The red carpets had welcomed her. But in the end, none of it protected her. Her fame, the very thing she worked so gently to build, had led the bullet to her. Rebecca Schaeffer didn't get to grow old. She didn't get her Oscar moment. She didn't get to reinvent herself in later years, to become a mother, to write. To disappear and return like so many stars do. Her story was cut off mid-sentence. But she didn't vanish. In the aftermath of her death, the world shifted. The first anti-stalking laws in California, and later across America, were passed in her name. The entertainment industry, once casual about the exposure of its stars, began rethinking how much access the public should have to private lives. Fan mail was filtered. Home addresses were protected. Boundaries, real, legal, and emotional, were drawn. She didn't intend to become a symbol. But she became one nonetheless. A cautionary tale. A turning point. A name whispered in every studio security meeting. A face remembered not just for what it was, but for what it warned. In a strange, bitter way, Rebecca did become immortal, not through the body of work she hoped to build, but through the silence she left behind. A silence that made noise. A silence that demanded laws. A silence that still echoes in every fan letter unopened. Every red carpet watched behind bulletproof glass. She didn't just die. She became a boundary.